Hello, college football fans, and welcome to episode 69 of College Football Throwdown. I'm your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, Husker fans and college football fans.
Yes, we might sound a little more downbeat than usual today. That would be because we are coming at you from 7:30 in the morning this day due to Dad's work schedule precluding us from doing our usual nighttime recordings.
Yes, so we'll be a little more subdued this morning and not going to be popping that beer like we normally would. Although, I'm tempted at 7:30 in the morning, but I'm just going to pass.
Right. Well, you could. I've got to go to work here pretty soon, so not an option for me. But we're gonna keep up our passion is still gonna be there, even if our voices are a little more calm.
There you go.
There we go. So diving into the first game we'll be talking about this week, the Nebraska-Iowa game, our final game of the season. You predicted that Iowa would win the game 42-21, while I predicted a Nebraska victory of 21-24. And you ended up being correct that Iowa won, but I was correct in terms of how close it would be with the final score of 28-31 Iowa.
Yep, that's right. And it really is a tale of two games in many respects. I mean, the beginning of the game, first half even, appeared that I was going to be right or maybe underestimating the final difference in the score because Iowa was able to do what they have done in recent years against us, which is to simply line up and play smash mouth football, real basic, and use their advantage, their dominance at the lines of scrimmage, both offensive line and defensive line, and just basically pound us into submission. But then things turned a little bit in the second half.
Yeah. Well, and it was interesting. The definite turning point was because you recall, like they kicked the ball deep into our own side of the field in the second half, and we couldn't do much there up against our own end zone, and it was fourth down, and that's where Scott Frost called the trick punt, where we actually went for it, and we got that first down, and from there, that started a drive that eventually led to a score, and the momentum definitely shifted from that point.
Right. Now remember though, it wasn't a punt that they gave us. They attempted a faked field goal, which failed.
That's right.
They had driven the ball down early in the second half. It kind of looked like they were going to just, dominate us and put some more points on the board. And then we were able to stiffen up enough to force them into a fourth down field goal try. And then they went for a fake and did not get it, was not successful. But wisely, they were looking at it and saying, well, this team's going to have to go 93 yards if we fail. So either way, we're in good shape, and they did fail, so they didn't get those points. And then of course they we got the ball and we didn't do anything. So again, everything was on course, and then we went for that fourth down, barely got it on the fake punt, but we did get it, and then proceeded to have some success, and from that point on, we also were like 4 for 4 from fourth downs throughout the rest of the game. So we just became an offense that was not going to punt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I forget exactly where this happened within the game, but you'll recall that I think it might have been later that Iowa went for the 2-point conversion instead of just kicking an extra point, and that ended up kind of costing them later on in the game, where if they had done that, then we'd be tied right now instead Nebraska's in the lead. Different situations like that, and then they had their own big mistake on special teams where their guy touched the ball but didn't catch it on I forget if it was a punt or a kickoff, and we got the ball, so we got an easy field position there.
Wow, I'm not remembering that. Okay. Um, is that are you confusing that with the Michigan game?
Maybe I am. That's possible.
I think you are,
Okay.
which we'll talk about in a little bit. But in our game we didn't get that. But the bottom line is that it's disappointing in that the outcome of the game didn't translate to a victory for us, and it's also very important that Nebraska fans and just in general people who watch the game um, are don't forget the fact that Iowa dominated us on the offensive and defensive line, and it's a real statement to how far away we still are from being able to be consistently good football team. Frankly, part of the reason we were able to succeed and make it bring it up to a tie and then force them to kick a field goal late in the game to beat us. Those are things that I don't want to call it luck because it's obviously scheme allows our offense to be successful like that, and then execution by a talented young quarterback in Adrian Martinez and some really talented receivers and such is critical to making that happen. But it still points to the fundamental of offensive line play and defensive line play that allows an Iowa team to be solid in all phases. And as we look to the future, we have optimism, but it has to be cautious optimism because um, we still have a long way to go on both the offensive and defensive line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and it's worth remembering that the game we played against them last year under Mike Riley, I forget the score, but it was a beat down. It
Oh
was
yeah,
it was a blowout. Whereas this time, even though we were down by 8 at the end of the half, which considering how much how they had been able to like score almost at will on us, when they are on offense and have these long 7-minute drives, they just dunked it down our throats, rushing it. I considered that okay, we're still in this, and then the third quarter we basically got nothing going, but then in the fourth quarter, like we said, that turnaround happened, and you're right, the punt. I'm forgetting about the punt because the only turnover in the game ended up, I believe, being by us later in the game, and that was another turning point, I think, where we were having a good drive down the field, and then Martinez threw an interception, a bad short ball that went right into the Iowa guy's hands. And had we scored there, and then because then the next time we got the ball later in the game, we did score. But if we had been able to get 2 scores there in the fourth quarter, then we might win the game. So,
I totally agree. Yeah, once we got the ball rolling, and that's the thing that tempo offense that we have creates some problems. And yes, we've got some youth, and we're going to have a lot of returning pieces to our puzzle. But it's just a matter of can we match the kind of physicality, and at some point we have to get effective enough on defense, particularly to be able to slow people down and not allow them to effectively score on almost every possession. And if we can start controlling the game a little bit more from that defensive standpoint, get a few more turnovers, a few more stops, physical stops, then that changes things for us, going forward. But if we don't do that, then frankly, I think we have another one of these seasons where we'll probably have some dramatic wins because of our offense, but we'll also have some very disappointing defeats.
right. Yeah, but and to the defensive credit, they're in the second half. We started making some adjustments, because they only scored once in that whole third quarter, even though our offense really wasn't getting much going. So the defense did get some stops there, and then there was the time where we forced them to kick a field goal, and their guy missed it.
Right.
So, so the defense got some important 3-and-outs, and we really, that's why I really felt like, oh, we might have this in the bag in the fourth quarter, because we really had some momentum going both on offense and defense. But then that interception kind of changed that flow. But, considering what you were saying last week and about playing an away game and against this difficult Iowa team, this physical Iowa team, I think the fact that it came down to, the last play of the game, kicking a field goal for the win, I take some pride in the fact that we made it that close.
I agree with you. I mean, I thought the guys, like you said, that the team played hard. There wasn't a quit in it, and I don't know if it was as much. You said adjustments. I don't know if it was as much adjustments, or frankly, that Iowa just didn't execute as much as well in the second half as they had in the first, and secondly, um, you know. They went away from what was working for them, which is notorious for teams. I mean, it's almost like an offensive coordinator can't help themselves. The idea. If I was going to prepare for Nebraska's defense right now, this year, I would have looked at what they could, or frankly couldn't do from the standpoint of stopping a running game, and I would have probably showed almost stubborn patience in the running game against Nebraska, because I think that even when they were doing run blitzes where they were trying to hit a gap, every gap being filled by a blitzing linebacker type of thing, even in those situations, teams have success running the football against us, because now you're basically relying on everyone to be in the right spots, and then they're pretty much one-on-one tackling. And what they were able to do early in the game, then the cut back lanes were massive when they would run their little zone, power scheme, and then just cut back. I mean, shit, there was like no one left, and yet they went away from that. They kind of threw the ball a little bit when they didn't really need to. There were a few series like that with Iowa, which were just head scratchers, and I'm sure Iowa fans are questioning that as well. But because they weren't successful when they went that route, the best thing we could have hoped for is for them to try to pass the ball more. Which I want to go back to that from a standpoint of analysis. When something we probably don't do enough of is to talk about what was the specific key things that we talked about before a game, and did they come true? What I had talked about, the fact that Adrian was going to struggle a little bit passing the football because their defensive line was going to be tall and powerful, and so we needed to be careful that he didn't hold on to the ball too long. And sure enough, all of those things kind of came true. There were some knockdown passes, and although he did a really good job, I thought Adrian played very well. He stands in the pocket too long. He takes too much time. He's got to get. They talked early in the season about being a quick blinker. He needs to blink faster in his progressions, and that'll come with time, I believe, and his continued effort. So I'm looking forward to what he can be.
Oh yeah, for sure, and yeah, I did notice that there were quite a few knockdown passes because of their tall linemen, but it wasn't as bad as I was fearing it would be.
True.
Was it the Michigan game where that was happening like all the time?
Yeah, and Michigan State too. Yep.
Okay, there you go.
And it has to, and it's not an uncommon thing, for our offense, where we're throwing so many of these little side passes and little slants that are fairly short passes. Most of the passing that we're doing is shorter passes, and so you really need an open lane to be able to throw that ball, like that. And when you've got wide, long-armed, tall guys like Iowa's defensive line, then they can present some problems in that way and make those gaps a little smaller, a little tighter windows than they normally would be.
Yeah, and one other last little cool thing to note is that in this game, Stanley Morgan had 7 receptions for 81 yards, which put him over 1,000 yards receiving for the year. And I believe he is the first Husker to ever do that. So he is definitely somebody we'll be missing next year. I hope that he goes on to play on Sunday and all that good stuff.
Yes, that he is the first Husker to ever get 1,000 yards, and we were very hopeful of that. In fact, there's been a couple of years previously where he toyed with that. So, I mean, he's walking away with a lot of records. Most receiving yards in a career, I believe, most receptions in a career, and also now most yards in a single season. So, he really has rewritten the record books. Now, if Scott Frost's offense continues to progress, you'd think that maybe J.D. Spielman has a chance if he stays healthy and were to stay until a senior year like Stanley has. Then J.D. has a chance to maybe match those kinds of performance numbers too. And we really missed Spielman. You imagine maybe what might have been if Spielman had played in the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it definitely did limit our options. Though Washington also had a good game.
Yeah, he did. A couple good receptions too.
Yep.
Not just running.
Yep. All right.
So yeah, the future's bright. I mean, we got some exciting things to think about, and next year's schedule leans more friendly in terms of home and away assignments. We're going to be, seeing some of our tougher games at home. So for a future podcast, we'll certainly be talking about, Nebraska's season next year and that sort of stuff. But we can't forget the fact that even like a team like Iowa is pretty young too, and a lot of their key pieces are going to be back next year. Their quarterback's going to be returning, and running backs, and defensively, a number of those defensive linemen, at least half of them are going to be back, and secondary, etc. So Iowa's a team that's going to be pretty salty again next year too.
Yep. All right. And so moving on to the wider college football landscape, in week 13, it was obviously rivalry week, as it usually is. And so there were some big games. And, of course, coming from Michigan, one game, and being in the Big Ten now, as we are at Nebraska, one game we always look forward to watching is the Ohio State-Michigan game, a classic. And we both gave predictions last week. I predicted a Michigan victory of 42-28. While you predicted 31-21. I think we were both confident that Michigan could do it, considering that Ohio State has just shown some shakiness just in the previous week's game. They gave up 40 points to a Maryland team.
50 points.
Was it 50 points? Wow.
Yeah.
There you go.
I think it was.
But then we come into this game, and Ohio State ends up winning 62-39 Michigan. And they're is it Haskins, their quarterback? Something like that.
Not Haskins. Darn it. Yeah. But I know who you're talking about. It's.
He just had a terrific day, and he was throwing it all over the place.
Well,
Michigan.
there's a couple of things. They did some things that I think from a coaching perspective are worth recognizing, and I mean Ohio State. Ohio State knew that they had some speed advantages at the cornerback position against Michigan's cornerbacks versus their wide receivers, and they did these crossing routes, drag routes across the field early in the game that basically gave their wide receivers the opportunity to simply outrun the man coverage of Michigan's cornerbacks, and it worked like a charm. I mean, they were wide open, and they kept finding ways to take advantage of that matchup of their corners against of Michigan's corners against their wide receivers, and the great speed of Ohio State really showed up. Also, their quarterback, Ohio State's quarterback, like you say, did play very well. but he was clean the whole game. Michigan's calling card all season had been that great aggressive offensive or a defensive line, and they had been attacking, and they practically ripped Adrian Martinez apart. They could have sacked him on almost every play. It seemed like when we played them, they were just so dominant. But Ohio State's offensive line stepped up and really did a number on them. Now I believe that ironically the specifics of what happened in the Maryland game, even though it ended up being a shootout and a near miss for Ohio State kind of introduced something during that game that I believe was pivotal to this game. And what it was um, up until that time, their quarterback had not been a runner. He'd been a guy that was content to stay in the pocket, maybe move around a little bit to buy himself some time, but ultimately he threw the football. Um, well, in the Maryland game, he began becoming a runner, and he became a runner to the tune of like 15 to 20 carries over the course of a game. That's significant for a quarterback. And there's two things. Number one, that's kind of Urban Meyer's MO is to have a running quarterback a la Tim Tebow. But also what it did was it forced, I believe, Michigan's defense to change or modify their attacking style a little bit. For whatever reason, their defensive line didn't get to the quarterback. And you can say, well, Ohio State's offensive line did a good job of blocking, which obviously they did. But I believe there was also maybe a conscious decision or tendency on Michigan's defensive coordinator's side to choose to maybe not be quite as aggressive and to do more to contain and to try to make sure that the quarterback didn't get out and get running the football. And because they were a little concerned about what they had seen on film the previous game. So I think it was a combination of some of those late season adjustments. The ability to bring in a curve, to change up what you do offensively in a significant way late in the season, I think is becoming a new trend in college football. Obviously, Alabama did the ultimate example of that when they switched quarterbacks in the second half of the national championship game last year, which they were being basically dominated. And then they put a guy who was more of a thrower in and had the ability to complete passes rather than just being a runner. And he totally changed the makeup of that game in the second half against Georgia. And I think Urban Meyer stole a page from Nick Saban in that regard.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought, and certainly, you could tell that Urban Meyer and the coaching staff there had been planning that Michigan game for a while. They definitely had a good scheme in mind.
They did, and they brought some things that they hadn't shown before, and they had obviously identified some areas of weakness that Michigan had that no one else had been able to exploit. And Michigan was a little stubborn. I mean, Michigan needed to play some zone. Once it was pretty obvious that the matchup with their cornerbacks and the wide receivers wasn't a good one, Michigan needed to change up, I think, and maybe play some more zone behind their defensive line and linebackers, and at least force that quarterback to change what he was looking at, and to not kind of so easily be able to diagnose what was going on. Now, to the quarterback's credit, he has been a great passer. He's had a prolific, passing year this year. So, I mean, the guy was phenomenal, and so that doesn't mean you would have been able to stop him, but you would have at least caused him to put a little bit more brain power into what is going on here than what he needed to.
Yeah, and I looked it up. I was right. Dwayne Haskins is his name.
Dwayne Haskins,
of the quarterback.
And is he a freshman? He's a sophomore? He's a sophomore this year.
I think that's right.
Yep.
But they, I also saw some frustration online, because I like to look at like Reddit and stuff as the game's going on, from some Michigan fans in terms of kind of decrying the conservative play calling on offense, and
Yep.
just kind of lamenting that Harbaugh, he's obviously a good coach, but he just can't seem to win the big games. Uh, because I think they've lost Ohio State all the years he's been there so far, and this was the year where they were the favorite for the first time, and admittedly, and they were playing away at Columbus, so that didn't help things either. But I know you were texting with our friend Brian Clower, a Michigan fan, during the game. Did you get any of that sort of thought from him?
Well, yeah, clearly frustrated, and he had he was worried about something like this happening. And again, because it's an MO that has become kind of standard for Harbaugh. And yes, that conservative kind of traditional approach, kicking field goals and things of that nature, where the new order of the day in football is to be more aggressive and to attack. And they have a defense that does that, but they don't have an offense that does that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So that was an interesting game, and now,
Well,
of course,
if I may ask, I'm going to mention, since we mentioned it earlier in the podcast, Alex, you forgetting or misallocating
the punt.
the horrible punt fumble that to me that was a critical play early in that game when the outcome maybe was still a little bit in doubt, and Michigan needed that offensive series badly, and instead they gifted Ohio State cheap, easy, points because of that botched. All he needed to do was fair catch it, just fair catch the damn thing.
Right.
They just
And I learned, I think over the course of, I think it was watching our game and then that game, I hadn't realized this new rule that if you do a fair catch before the 25-yard line, you automatically get moved out to the 25.
correct. Yep. It's just like a punt, fair catch, but then it guarantees you that way. What they're trying to do, obviously, is from a safety standpoint, one of the most dangerous plays in the sport is the kickoff return in terms of injuries and that sort of thing. So that's why they put that rule in. I kind of don't love it because it takes away the kicker's ability to do things, but it's a reaction to the fact that when they started screwing around with that whole kickoff arrangement, then teams started kicking the ball off differently. Instead of kicking it, they had hoped people would just kick it out of the end zone, but instead, what people were doing was they were trying to kick it so that the ball would be as high as possible. Okay, which usually on a kickoff didn't matter quite as much. If you're kicking it out of the end zone, you want to get it through the end zone. But now they were having people kick it as high as they could, and then forcing the team to field the punt or field the kick rather by having it not go all the way to the end zone. You would want it to land between the goal line and the 5-yard line. That forces the team to have to return the kick, and then you hope to corner them before they get to the 20 type of thing. Well, to combat that strategic change that happened in college football, then they decided to do this fair catch thing, this year, and it worked, I think, in terms of just removing even more kickoffs from being real plays.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, actually, I believe when that rule change happened, we talked about it on this very podcast and mentioned that would probably be a new strategy, because it makes sense. Like kick it to like the 1, and force them to take it out. And you'll recall that the score at the end of the half was 24-19, because Michigan finally got a touchdown, and then that's where Ohio State dropped it on the kickoff, and Michigan immediately scored after that. But then after that, Ohio State had 40 seconds left, and they got a good drive going, and they got down and close enough for a field goal. So it was an exciting end to the half. That made me think that Michigan was gonna, keep it close maybe. But
Yeah, I agree that it seemed like that would have been the momentum they needed, and that was a critical play and all that. But yep, then Michigan didn't come out in the second half and do what we thought they would do.
yep. Okay, and so the other game we gave a prediction for was the other game with big implications for the championship game, Oklahoma versus West Virginia. I predicted that West Virginia would win 45-42. Well, you predicted Oklahoma 45-42. And it turns out you were more correct. And it was a 3-point difference in the game, though the final score ended up being 59-56, a good old Big 12 score. But another very close game. Clearly, both those teams were closely matched, and they've had a lot of close, high-scoring games throughout the season. Kind of a bummer for West Virginia, considering that they've been the leader in the conference for weeks now, and here at the very end they kind of trip up, kind of like Michigan, although obviously not in the blowout way that it happened to Michigan.
Right, exactly. Well, and they had lost to Oklahoma State here recently too, so they kind of trailed off there towards the end of the season. But there's something about for me. I'm still trying to get used to this new age that we live in football with these high scoring offenses, and just even to make a quick reference to the Ohio State game, the pass interference penalty has become such a prominent part of most college football games, and I think the inability to cover wide receivers, because of the way the rules are set up, makes it so difficult on the defensive back that the advantage is so strongly in favor of the offense that it's just really hard to stop. And Oklahoma's offense is so prolific that it's hard to stop it. Now, equally bad is their defense, and that's where I struggle to, embrace or understand how that's one of the 4 best teams in the country. But we'll be getting into that debate quite significantly here, I bet, in following this weekend, as depending on what happens. But I just think I find it fascinating to have that debate, and certainly if debate was the reason for setting this system up the way they did, then by golly, the college football playoff group has done their job, because there's certainly a lot of debate going on about the different scenarios and who and what and why so and so should be in.
Yep. Well, and I actually have an interesting note about that we'll get to later. And it's worth noting that I remember in that Ohio State-Michigan game, Ohio State ended up having I think 10 or 12 penalties. They had a lot.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And
125 yards.
Right. And
35 yards.
Right. And Michigan had some big ones as well, but definitely not as many. But despite that, obviously Ohio State was able to still win the game. And another interesting game was the good old rivalry game, Washington versus Washington State. Kind of a similar situation where Washington State's been in the lead in the Pac-12 for a long time, but here at the end they trip up, lose 28-15, and so now all of the best teams in the Pac-12 have at least 3 losses, meaning that it's almost impossible for them to get into the playoff at this point.
That's correct. Yep, I would agree. That's pretty much the deal. Yep, and the Apple Cup is well known for being a game where favorites go to die.
Yep. Funny how that works. And we were talking about high-scoring games. There's one, obviously, that we have to talk about in that case.
Yes.
The Texas A&M LSU game, which ended up going into 7 overtimes, tying the record, and ended up being 74-72 Texas A&M. I believe that is the highest-scoring game in all of college football now. I was kind of bummed. We were watching a movie that night, and I saw the score afterwards, and I wish I was watching it live, because that would have been fun.
Well, I ended up watching it. I picked it up on a rerun. They replayed it. I don't know the timing or even what channel. I can't remember, but but I did see the last four overtimes. So I didn't watch the whole game, but I got to see the last four overtimes, which was fascinating. I mean, those guys were basically dead men walking. Everybody was going through the motions. There was like virtually no celebration after tackles. The defenses were both exhausted, and neither team really could stop the other one. By that point, they were both so physically just drained. It seemed like, and there was a wide receiver from Texas A&M who kind of lit fire and caught two or three touchdown passes in the overtime periods. And he was just a matchup nightmare. He's like 6'6" wide receiver with some really good hands, made some spectacular catches. But here's the thing that I can't do this without going on. It's just something about Texas officiating. The officiating in that game was very questionable, in my opinion, and classic of officiating involving a Texas team. An extra second was put on the clock that allowed
Right.
Texas A&M to score. They got an extra play. Everybody thought the game was over. In fact, the LSU coach had received his Gatorade bath for the successful victory against Texas A&M. And then, lo and behold, the referees get together and they put a second back on the clock. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah,
I mean, it's just amazing how that always happens in the state of Texas. And I mean, there's been more examples of just referees, and I don't know whether they're influenced by crowd more in that state or fear of reprisal. I don't know what it is, but how is it that magically the Texas teams always get these advantages? It just blows me away. I would love for some analysis to be done on that, because it sure seems to me, anecdotally, that happens to the benefit of Texas, the University of Texas, or Texas A&M more than any other schools that I watch, and I watch a lot of college football.
Yeah, well, we'll never forget the 1 second from our Texas game back in the day. Our last
Well, that's
game
right.
in the Big 12.
But if I'm LSU, I'm a little pissed.
Right. I saw the highlight reel from it, or kind of a recap, and yeah, that A&M receiver was making some fantastic catches, and they were clearly going back to him over and over again. Yeah, that was a fun game. Alabama beat Auburn 52-21. Clemson beat South Carolina 56-35. Notre Dame beat USC 24-17. Northwestern beat Illinois 24-16. So, some of those were a little closer, but basically everybody who kind of won there was expected to win. So we're getting those matchups we kind of expected in their championship games, which will be interesting to see. Interestingly, the Clemson's playing Pitt in their championship game, and Pitt just lost 24-3 to Miami. So they're coming off of a kind of a hard loss.
Right. And there's some very probably disappointing in the eyes of the broadcasters and stuff. Some of these conference championship games. I mean, clearly the Ohio State Northwestern is not an ideal matchup. I think most people are going to, hope that Northwestern can continue to play the kind of error-free brand of football that has been their moniker, and particularly this season, and make things interesting and tight with Ohio State. Just because if Ohio State continues to be as error-prone as they were, like for example in the Michigan game with some mental mistakes and then all those penalties, that's the type of situation where maybe Northwestern is able to take advantage of those mistakes and hang around and make some noise. But most people would look at those two teams and say there's a big disparity and Ohio State's going to win, and maybe comfortably. And then similarly, the Clemson Pitt thing is going to be very lopsided in all likelihood. And so that's going to be kind of a disappointing. Those are disappointing matchups, I think, for both media and public interest as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one last game to talk about from Week 13 is UCF versus USF. UCF ended up winning 38-10. However, the cost was Mackenzie Milton their quarterback had a brutal leg injury. From what I've
Yes.
seen, he did suffer some nerve damage, but they've already done like a preliminary surgery on it. It seems like he'll recover, but whether he'll be able to play
But
football again is kind of questionable.
right, there
And
was some question of whether or not they would be able to return blood flow to his leg and whether they would need to be able to save his leg. I mean, that's how bad it was. So, um, um, yeah, that was a freak deal. Feel so bad for that young man, not only because of what's gone on and transpired with that team, but just him as a player. Obviously, the heart and soul of that team in many regards, and a tough cookie, and very talented. I mean, a guy that really was making it happen. But I first of all pray for a full and perfect recovery for him. But at the very minimum, I'm just happy that he hasn't had anything worse happen.
Yep. Yep, that's good. Yeah, and obviously I feel some kinship with USCF because of the Scott Frost connection now. And obviously they're like the underdog, still going undefeated here. And Mackenzie Milton has been a super talented quarterback for them. So that is definitely a bummer. Even if they win this upcoming Memphis game and are undefeated at the end of the season, if they were to somehow make it into the playoff, to have to play without their star quarterback, who helped them beat Auburn last year, that would definitely be a bummer. That they finally get their wish, but at this terrible price.
Yes, exactly, that would be it would be too easy of an "I told you so" moment for people who believe that they don't deserve a chance. But I mean, it's hard to win football games in today's modern football, and for these UCF players to have gone effectively 2 seasons at this point undefeated is pretty damn impressive. So if they were able to emerge victorious in this conference championship game against Memphis, and be undefeated, by golly, that deserves some significant recognition. It's just not an easy task to do, no matter at what level. But very impressive what's happened at UCF, and you got to give that coach a lot of credit. He was smart enough to save what was good, to tweak what he knew, and to take the great culture that Scott had helped build there and maintain it well enough over the course of the season for them to not lose. I mean, that's really impressive, including some games where they had to come back from way down to win.
Mm-hmm. Yep. They're a team with a lot of heart for sure. So looking ahead to next week, we already mentioned some of the championship games: UCF Memphis, Northwestern Ohio State, Clemson Pitt. We have Texas Oklahoma, rematch game. Utah plays Washington, and then obviously Alabama Georgia, the big game that will have significant implications on the playoff. So yeah, it's going to be an exciting week of college football coming up.
It will. There's some. I complained about a few of the games, but there's some really good matchups. That Oklahoma Texas rematch has got some real intrigue, and obviously is central to this because I think most people are Notre Dame's in
Yep.
because they don't play this week, and then you look at Clemson Pitt, and it would seem almost assured that Clemson's going to come out victorious on that game, and so they're in. Now, Alabama Georgia creates a little bit of intrigue because Georgia's a very good team that's been playing pretty well here late in the season, and if there's somebody that would maybe be able to present some problems for Alabama, it's going to be Georgia. Now, but I could also see, much like the LSU score when Alabama played LSU, where Alabama goes in there and dominates. I mean, that wouldn't shock me at all. So it'll be intriguing to see what goes on there. But that Oklahoma Texas game, remember Texas beat them when they played in the Red River Shootout, and so it'll be interesting to see if Texas is able, because Texas has been playing pretty well of late. And so, can they match up? Can they do it again and beat Oklahoma again? If they did, that would, I think, help pave the way for an Ohio State victory to lead to inclusion in the playoff for Ohio State. If Oklahoma wins, say, a tight game, then I think Ohio State will need to have a blowout dominant victory against Northwestern to be in the discussion because much similar to last year, Ohio State has that ugly loss on their resume that could hurt them. I mean, at this point, Oklahoma's loss is not an ugly loss. Oklahoma's loss is to the same Texas team they're going to be playing this time. And so, if they win, then they will obviously have the on their resume the avenging of their one loss against the talented, I think probably top 15, if not top 10 ranked Texas team. So their credibility is going to go up from this. Whereas, Ohio State can only gain so much from beating Northwestern.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Well, and that might be a situation where the perception of Northwestern, because they have a great record in conference, but they lost a lot of their out of conference games early in the season, so they don't have a very good record in comparison to some of these other teams.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
So it's going to be a problem.
yeah, it's going to be a problem for sure. And the that Oklahoma I was just looking up the Alabama Georgia game that is played in Atlanta, so Georgia
Yes.
basically has the home field advantage there. So we'll have to see if that has any effect. We can give maybe our score predictions here. What are you thinking for Alabama Georgia?
I think Alabama wins comfortably. I can't. I struggle to assign an actual score to this. But I'm going to say it's going to be probably in the 30s. So I'm going to say 38-28. Alabama wins.
38-28. Okay, I think that's solid.
You know what? Let's make that 38-21.
Throwing one. All right, more lopsided.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna predict Alabama victory as well, but I think Georgia's gonna keep it close. So I think I'll go for 38-31 is my score.
Okay. Okay.
A little higher than yours. And then we've got the Texas-Oklahoma game. What are you feeling there?
Boy, this one's so hard because I don't want Texas to ever have success. But I'm going to put my Big Ten hat on and say that Oklahoma, I just think has an Achilles heel, which is that defense. And I could be completely wrong here because now that they smell the blood in the water and they have so much to play for, Oklahoma should come out and play just lights out. They should just play super aggressive and everything like that. But I have a feeling Texas is going to match that. And this is going to be Tom Herman's moment to shine. So I'm going to predict a Texas victory here in a close game, but one in which Oklahoma gets frustrated a little bit by Texas's defense and doesn't put up quite as many points. So I'm going to say it'll be a low scoring, 38-35.
I like how that's low scoring now.
Yeah.
So you're saying 30-35 Texas.
Texas. Yep.
All right. Well, I'm looking at their previous game, which Texas won 48-45. I'm going to go ahead and predict that it's going to be the same score, but it's going to be the opposite. Oklahoma's going to pull it out this time.
You're probably right on that one. I mean, if I wasn't going quite so much with my heart in this, that because I believe that unless Oklahoma plays ugly, if they win, I think they're in over Ohio State.
Right. Well, yeah, I think that's true. And it is worth noting that Texas played against Kansas this past week and won 24-17. So
yeah, I know.
A little bit of a closer game, too close for comfort probably for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
A Kansas team. And then lastly, we have Northwestern Ohio State, our Big Ten championship game. What are you feeling there?
I'm feeling Ohio State blowout. I love I think the storybook of this classic season that Northwestern has been able to, find a way in every game and just has great toughness and all that sort of stuff, and just can kind of grind it, make every game a grinder game, and 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 I'm ignoring that. I'm throwing that out the window because I have a feeling that Ohio State's momentum Michigan game is going to carry forward into this game. And I think Haskey Haskins
Yeah.
has emerged now with this dual threat aspect of him running the football, and I think they're going to let him loose again this week against the Northwestern defense that does not have the skill talent to match up.
Okay. So what are you thinking?
Score, yeah, number. Oh God, um, 45-21.
45-21. Wow. All right. Looking through some of their stats, they've definitely lost. Like they lost against Michigan, but they played them close, 20-17.
Right.
So I'm going to predict that Ohio State wins, but I think Northwestern's defense is going to slow them down more than Michigan's did, ironically, even though Michigan's supposed to have a great defense. So I'm going to predict, let's say, 31-24 victory for Ohio State.
Okay.
That's what I'm going to say.
Very thoughtful of you.
Yes. And last thing to talk about here would be just, once again, some of those playoff discussions, because as you said, the top four did change this week because Michigan lost. So now it's Alabama, Clemson, Notre Dame, Georgia, followed by Oklahoma, then Ohio State, then Michigan after that, then UCF after that. So it would appear that if everything kind of goes as planned, then it would be Alabama, Clemson, Notre Dame, and Oklahoma in there, with Ohio State getting left out, despite being the champion, which I think is fair overall. But certainly, if Oklahoma, struggles against Texas, or if Ohio State just blows out Northwestern, it looks like, they've kind of turned a corner here at the end of the season. That can make things more interesting, certainly. I was a little surprised looking at the rankings that Michigan was a 10-2 team, was still ranked above the undefeated UCF team. And now, obviously, I think if UCF wins against Memphis, they will certainly pass them. But it does seem like it would have, in the committee's mind, there would have to be a number of circumstances for UCF to make it in there.
Absolutely. That UCF did not play enough quality opponents over the course of the season to garner the kind of recognition, even though they've won those games. Now, having the chance here in their conference championship game to beat a team that I believe they beat them during the regular season, and they had to come back from behind quite significantly to do so. So this is a team they're playing that is very legitimate and in its own right, and now without Mackenzie Milton, it'll be interesting to see how this UCF team is able to respond, and if they are, because they're not as good a defensive team in my opinion as they were last year. And even offensively, they're still prolific, but a lot of that had to do with Milton. So it'll be interesting to see. If UCF wins that game, then they certainly, like you say, will jump ahead of the Michigan conversation. But the question would be, would they be chosen, above both Ohio State and? I don't think so. I don't see it happening. Now, in Ohio State's situation, they have no one to blame but themselves, in that you can't lose to Purdue and almost lose to Maryland and some other meddling kind of teams in terms of record, and not have that impact you. And even though Oklahoma plays a no defense brand of football, their offense is so prolific that it's easier to overlook that when they have found a way to win each time, except for the Texas game. And obviously a victory this weekend would avenge that singular loss. So I think for all of those reasons, Oklahoma has the advantage.
Yeah, but I think also like just I was just looking up to remind myself Texas already has 3 losses, so if they were to
Right.
win, but Ohio State won, I think clearly Ohio State would get in over
Oh,
them.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, there's no doubt. If Oklahoma loses and Ohio State wins, Ohio State's in.
Now, if what if both Texas and Northwestern win? Then what happens?
Well, then that's when the discussion about UCF becomes legit because now you're talking about now you're discussing um, UCF undefeated UCF versus Michigan, Ohio State, or Oklahoma with 2 losses. I mean, and I think they might be compelled to force the UCF thing in,
Yeah.
and that would be the end of that. Now, what makes it interesting and would frustrate me is the whole Georgia Alabama thing. If Georgia were to find a way to beat Alabama and those other 2 things still happen, then you got the same thing as last year. You'd have Georgia and Alabama in there.
Right. So, okay, so let's go through that. So, Ohio State wins, Oklahoma wins, but and Clemson wins, but Alabama loses to Georgia, so they have 1 loss now, up against 1 loss teams in both Oklahoma and Ohio State uh, as champions. You think Alabama still gets in that scenario? Because
Yeah.
we went over
Say
that
I
for last year. Ohio State had 2 losses, one an
right,
ugly loss, and then one a more close, respectable loss. Whereas
right.
in this scenario, each both Oklahoma and Ohio State would only have one, and like you say, Oklahoma would have avenged their 1 loss if they were to beat Texas. So
Yeah.
I think Oklahoma
I think
gets in that
I would
scenario.
too. I would say that the committee cannot afford to shun one of the Power Five again in favor of an Alabama team that certainly wins the eye test and has had a prolific season. But if they're not able to finish the deal and aren't able to be conference champions, I would really hope that the committee would say, "Hey, conference champion matters," and in this case, the differential of the 2 1-loss teams is not sufficient enough. We're going to go with Oklahoma, and they'd go with Oklahoma.
Right. But then if Oklahoma loses but Ohio State wins, do we think that same thing happens with?
Then I'd say Alabama gets in
You think?
over Ohio State. I think Ohio State has too many skeletons in its resume to overcome a 1-loss Alabama team, which has dominated everything up to this point and is going to go down as greatest teams in the history of college football if they don't lose.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean that's where people lose.
Mm-hmm.
It's very 95 Nebraska ish, and so they they're going to get the benefit of the doubt in that situation, and it will drive change in the college football playoff. It's circumstances like that will lead to us having an 18 playoff
Yeah.
the next time that negotiation happens.
Okay. Cool. Well, and so the last bit I wanted to bring up was I saw an interesting comment on the once again on the college football Reddit from Bob Stoops 401k with an Oklahoma flair next to his name, so you can kind of see his bias there. But he starts talking about here's his post. He says the committee should judge wins, losses, and resume. They shouldn't try to dictate the style of play they deem acceptable for the playoff. If instead we beat everyone 13-7, we should also get a shot. So he kind of goes on about talking about the influence of the game, or the playoff committee trying to influence kind of the style. It's part of what makes the sport so great. If you win with offense or if you win with defense, winning is what matters. And then he brings up LSU. They are top 10 despite having 3 losses because they play a brand of football that is considered classically sound. They might lose games, but at least they don't have a turnstile as a defense. If OU has 3 losses on the season, they wouldn't be near the top 10. LSU was shut out on home turf by Alabama and are simply riding what looks to be a fluke win against Georgia to relevance. So he's basically kind of harping on what you said before. You know, is the committee like judging different styles of playing football? Because Oklahoma does have a bad defense. They've let people score 50 points on them, 40 points on them pretty regularly. But if their offense is so good that they still win games, does that matter?
Right, and I would argue that there is a built-in historic bias against that kind of wide open offense with the also wide open defense kind of approach. But at the end of the day, I think that I think the committee would arrive at the right spot. I could be wrong, but there's more to it. I mean, that's the rose-colored glasses of an OU fan. The thing that they're also missing is within their conference and their non-conference slate, who did they play? The Big 12 is not loaded or filled with top flight teams, and so the Ohio State victory, for example, against Michigan, is regarded as a more quality win than anything that Oklahoma's done. So that's where Ohio State's argument comes from: is, hey, we had to go through the Big Ten, which most people agreed was a tougher conference top to bottom, and Ohio State had to play, a very tough conference schedule, 9 conference games, and they were able to, win all but one of those. And they beat Michigan, and they beat Penn State at Penn State. I mean, that was an incredible victory on the road earlier in the season when they beat Penn State. So, I mean, Ohio State has some signature wins at its disposal.
Right. And I guess looking through Oklahoma's schedule, their big wins are against Oklahoma State and then West Virginia.
Right.
With a very close loss to Texas.
Right.
So that would be their argument. But like you say, Ohio State, they've had their win over Michigan, their win over Penn State. So yep. They've had some quality wins as well.
Exactly. So that would be the argument for Ohio State, but it's not a very strong argument for Ohio State, is my point. I think Ohio State needs to hope for a Texas victory, or a really dominant blowout of Northwestern, and that's why I am influenced in my prediction on the championship game. The Big Ten championships and championships in general tend to either be really nail biters, competitive, or blowouts. There's kind of not an in-between that typically happens. And I think this sets up to be a blowout for Ohio State, because Ohio State's going to be very motivated to score and score often and run this thing up and make it as impressive as possible.
Yes, they definitely will be motivated to do that. I love during the Ohio State-Michigan game, they played that quote from, I think it was... I forget if it was
Woody Hayes.
Yeah, the Woody Hayes, like, why'd you go for 2? And he's like, because I couldn't go for 3.
Yep, exactly. That was Woody.
That was his style. All right, cool. So if you guys enjoy listening to this podcast, you can email us at huskerpete13@gmail.com. You can find us online at College Football Throwdown if you search for us on iTunes or on the Apple Podcast app. You can give us ratings and reviews. We always like hearing back from the fans. We'll try to do a podcast maybe earlier in the week next week if some upsets happen and it looks like there's a legit debate about the playoff. We'd like to talk about that before the committee makes their decision. But if everything plays out kind of as expected, then there won't be too much to talk about there.
Well, yeah, we'll be able to talk about the Final Four at that point. So
right, yep. So either way, there will be a lot to talk about, and then obviously, that we don't have a bowl game to look forward to for Nebraska, but we'll talk about some of the big bowl games coming up for other teams, as well as recruiting news out of Nebraska and other elements like that.
Sounds great.
All right, so thank you for hosting with me today, Dad, and until next week, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.